G'day everyone, prepaussie here. I hope you're all well in whatever part of the world you're watching this video. Today is Monday the 4th of June 2018 and the time here is 10:55 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time. Well folks, the world just only keeps getting weirder and there's so much happening. As I said before, you just physically cannot keep up with all the stuff. The big thing that happened on the weekend, which I'm pretty sure would have just gone straight over everybody's head. If you remember, I've been saying for a while now that the South China Sea is there's no two ways about it. It's going to turn into a conflict area. Because China is saying that it's ours and everybody else can just piss off. Well, sadly that's not the case, and I've been through this before. The International Law Tribe, I think it's the International Court of Arbitration, has ruled that China has no legitimate right to the land or any of the area. In actual fact, if you read anything that I sent last time, or the last time I did this about the South China Sea, the ABC had a great, funny enough, they actually had something great. They actually had a really good pictured dichotomy thing about how this all works. And the biggest landholder there is the Philippines. Now the Philippines, you know, you could literally throw a rock from the beach and hit these islands sort of thing. And even more so Brunei. China's a gazillion light years away from it. No territorial law or would ever say that they owned any of it. They're so far away from it. So look, this has been going on for a while, and really what should have happened here was, and this is Obama's fault, because they started doing this in Obama's reign. And he just went, yeah, who gives a shit? The Philippines President Duarte, if that's his name, Duarte, should have done something about it earlier. But he was appeased somewhat by the Chinese because he got given money, I think, and all this sort of crap. So he was pretty happy with the trade deal that they got. But the problem is that the Chinese have escalated this to the point where you just can't ignore it anymore. And you hope and pray that, you know, this is not going to get any worse. But something happened on Friday which would have meant that everybody missed it. And the US has finally come out and said, guys, this isn't happening. This isn't going to happen the way you think this is going to happen anyway. And gave China a slap on the wrist. To which China turned around and said, thanks very much, don't tell us what we're doing with our land, sort of thing. And was sadly pretty belligerent about it. And, you know, have actually been pretty belligerent about this whole thing, really. And it's now going to have a knock-on effect with everybody. Look, they've weaponised these islands. And in the last week, 2 weeks, sorry, they've actually weaponised them to the point where they are lethal weapons. I'm going to show you the ABC printout or report on exactly what's going on there. But look, guys, if we're in Australia, you need to keep a real eye on this, because this ain't going to end well. Regardless of whose side we're on, you know, we actually have to take the American side, so that's just the way things are. But, you know, even the Russians can't turn around and say to the Chinese, oh, it's your land, because they're so far away from this, it's just ridiculous. So I would suppose the way this is going to go is we'll get into a protracted dispute about it. It'll go to the United Nations. The United Nations will say they'll do their non-veto, their veto blocks and all this sort of crap, and nothing will happen, no resolution will get passed, and then eventually someone's going to bomb somebody else or whatever. The interesting thing here, and I'm going to read the full report from ABC to you because it's actually quite interesting, is that China's basically turned it around and said, by the way, US, stop giving Taiwan military equipment because that's part of our territory. Well, excuse me if I'm wrong, but I always thought Taiwan was a country on its own, but I may be wrong. And they said something quite outlandish, quite in your face to America about it as well. I'm going to read the report, like I said, and you can see for yourself that this isn't going down a great road. I don't know whether they think that it's because they feel the Americans are weakened or they're broke or whatever, but you'd have to be blind Freddy shooting ducks in a field to not understand that, the US has got superiority. If you've got air superiority, you've got everything. Now, as far as I remember, those B-52 stealth bombers can fly just about anywhere and no one even knows they're there. And next thing you know, you're getting bombs dropped on you from, 60,000 feet. So there's a lot in this, and we all need to pay attention to it, regardless of everything else that's going on at the moment. So let me read this report to you. Now, this is the US Defense Secretary, John Mattis. Now, there was a summit held in Singapore, funny enough, last week with a lot of nations. And China was there as well. But I'll let this play and you can listen to what he says. And if you don't hear it on my video, then all you've got to do is go on the link that I'm going to put in the description box and you can listen to it yourself anyway. So here you go. Just wait.
Despite China's claims to the contrary, the placement of these weapon systems is tied directly to military use for the purposes of intimidation and coercion. China's militarization of the Spratlys is also in direct contradiction to President Xi's 2015 public assurances in the White House Rose Garden that they would not do this.
Okay. Did you pick the key words there?
Directly to military use for the purposes of intimidation and coercion.
Intimidation and coercion. So that's pretty strong rhetoric coming from the US. So let me read this to you, because this is important to all Australians. Because as we're speaking, US, Australia and the UK, as far as I know, I'm not sure if there's any others, but I'm pretty sure that it's those three, actually have boats or ships. Boats are something you row in, aren't they? Going up and back in this disputed area. Also, the Americans have Marines on the Australian boats. There is also an Australian submarine around there somewhere that left here a month ago and that's its general area that it's going to be in. So this is hotting up real big, folks, real quick. So let me read this to you. US Defense Secretary James Mattis has raised the prospect of additional American steps against China if its militarization of the South China Sea keeps apace. Mr. Mattis said Beijing was intimidating and coercing others in the region by putting weapon systems on man-made islands. US President Donald Trump, backing the remarks by his Pentagon chief at an international security forum in Singapore, said on Twitter, very surprised that China would be doing this. Well, they're not, because they knew China was doing it anyway. Mr. Mattis said the Trump administration's recent decision to disinvite China from a multinational naval exercise was an initial response to Beijing's island activity, which obviously Beijing doesn't give a shit about. He called the US action a relatively small consequence. I believe there are much larger consequences in the future, he said. China's reliance on military muscle to achieve its goals is not a way to make long-term collaboration the rule of the road in a region that's important to China's future, Mr. Mattis said, when asked to elaborate. They're pretty strong words, folks. There are consequences that will continue to come home to roost, so to speak, with China if they don't find a way to work more collaboratively with all the nations who have interest, he said. The bluster comes at a delicate time in US-China relations as the Trump administration is warily asking for China's help with North Korea ahead of a June 12th summit, while also threatening a trade war. These Chinese guys, by the way, are standing on the new Chinese aircraft carrier. Mr. Trump renewed his threat to hike tariffs on Chinese goods just days before his Commerce Secretary arrived in Beijing on Saturday for trade talks. And this gets interesting from here, let me tell you. Mr. Mattis said there was little doubt about Beijing's intentions. Well, that's a bit of a brick in the face for China, isn't it? And everybody else. Despite China's claim to the contrary, the placement of these weapon systems is tied directly to military use for the purpose of intimidation and coercion. Well, you've already heard that part. China recently has deployed anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air missiles, electronic jammers and other equipment on the Spratly Islands and landed a bomber aircraft at Woody Island. Mr. Mattis, now this is the bit that gets interesting, folks, also touched on Taiwan, a long-standing dispute between the US and China. He said Washington would continue to provide defence equipment and services to Taiwan and oppose any effort to alter the status quo. Now, this is where it gets bad. Listen to this bit. The Chinese government and the Chinese people resolutely oppose US arms sales to Taiwan, as well as any official contact with Taiwan and upgrading ties with Taiwan in any way, said He Li, Vice President of the Academy of Military Science of the Chinese Liberation Army. Now this is where it gets really bad. Listen to this. The Chinese people and the Chinese government will never allow any person, any political party and any organisation under any name to separate any piece of Chinese territory from China at any time and in any form, he said. Now, listen to this. The Chinese People Liberation Army has the determination, confidence and the ability to safeguard China's sovereignty, security, unity and development interests, i.e. we're happy to go to war with you to fight this if we have to. We think we can beat you. I don't know where this picture's from. You know, you'd probably, it's not going to be given direct access from the Chinese, so that's somewhere in China, I'm guessing. China claims the self-governing island as its own territory to be brought under its control by force if necessary. But Mr. Mattis also said the US welcomed cooperation with China wherever possible and announced that he had accepted Beijing's invitation to visit soon. This bit made me laugh. It was not immediately clear whether that invitation would stand after the conference. Mr. Mattis's comments drew a pointed reaction from a Chinese official at the meeting. Senior Colonel Zhao Zibo said a US move to send 2 warships into China's territorial waters was a violation of law and an obvious provocation to China's national security and territorial integrity. Mr. Mattis responded to that question, responded that the question reflected a fundamental disconnect with the way international tribunals have spoken on the matter, which is correct. International tribunals said that China has no claim to these islands at all. We do not see it as a militarisation by going through what has traditionally been, and has always been, an international water space, said Mr. Mattis, of the US ship movements through the South China Sea. What we see it as is a reaffirmation of the rules-based order. 2 US warships sailed close to the Parcel Islands on May 27th in the latest freedom of navigation operation designed to challenge Beijing's claims. China protested the manoeuvre. So, things aren't going well there, folks. As I said, they wouldn't be, because the Chinese aren't going to back down. And sadly, I can't see this ending any other way except with someone getting bombed, and you would hope to dear God that the Chinese aren't silly enough to attack a US warship or anything. Because by Christ, that would be the one that broke the camel's back, wouldn't it? You would hope that everybody would see common sense here. I just can't see how this can work in China's interest because, you know, I always said, didn't I, the day they land long-range bombers on that island that can reach Pine Gap, the Americans would kick up a fuss. Up until that point, it's just a, yeah, go play with yourself sort of thing. But this is now ratcheted up to the point where they're landing long-range bombers, which might not sound like a big deal, but it is. Long-range bombers come with a lot of other fuel tankers, and they can literally fly 24 hours straight, you know, which is i.e. around the world. So you'd have to think that you'd hope that there's some way out of this. Now, the crucial thing for us here in Australia is how our dopey-eared, dumb-witted, pathetic, moronic, is there anything else I can say, Richard craniums in our, that call themselves our politicians, have any idea what they're going to do here. You know, we're obviously going to have to follow America's lead, but what will be the consequences for us here? Because after that speech, Australia has no option, and I mean this, no option but to follow America's lead. So very shortly, we should have Australia's response to the American stand on this. That, in turn, will obviously piss off the Chinese enough to force consular visits, etc., blah, blah, blah. Well, folks, look, you just got to, you can't not pay attention to this, because this is going to get worse before it gets better, obviously. And I don't know what better is. Is there any better? You've got a country that's on the rise and a country that a lot of people feel is on the wane. But is it on the wane? Because Trump's reinvigorated it so much that maybe perhaps we're all wrong. Well, we hope we are. Because, yeah, look, let's all be honest here. When America's at its supreme best, it's probably done some of the shittiest things in history, you know, invading countries, etc., you know. But I personally felt a lot more safer when the US was at the top of its, you know, in its prime than what it would be if, you know, China, Russia, and anyone else who wants to have a go wants to be the top dog on the planet. It just seems to keep that equilibrium. So please do me a favour, share this with as many Australians as you can, because, you know, this isn't going to go away tomorrow. And our ships are there now, right there now. you would probably think that the Chinese are putting these short-range ballistic missiles, etc., there for, you know, they're sick of telling people get out of our waters, so now they're going to prove that it's their waters, which would be a big, big mistake. Please don't do it, China. But if they do, then yeah, this is going to go down elite faster than Eddie Eagle off a ski slope. I don't know what else to say, but please make sure everyone you know gets to see this. And as I've always said, prep. Make sure you're prepping. Make sure you're ready for whatever. Okay? Folks, well, you're not going to believe, after everything that I just said, what the Bible verse is of the day. I'm starting to think that God's looking over my shoulder while I'm doing this stuff, and he's actually putting these up for me as I'm going. I've got to be honest, because this is just freaky. Watch this. Verse of the day. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Wow. Unbelievable. Wish I'd known that when I was younger. So do a lot of other people, I think. And as always, folks, let's all end with the Lord's Prayer and pray that this doesn't get any worse. Let's just pray for common sense, eh? Wouldn't it be good if Trump just said to them, guys, pack up your stuff, put it on the boats and piss off. And they went, okay, no problem, we'll do that. What are we doing? We're crazy, aren't we? Yeah, we're not. What are we doing? We just lost our head for a minute. We're just going to fix this up, righto? Somehow I don't see that's going to happen, which is pretty sad in itself. The Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Well, as I've said, folks, this is, probably one of the most serious things that I can bring up. Apart from tomorrow, and on the other scale, I'm going to talk about some financial stuff that I'm hoping that you guys know about. Because if you don't, then you need to, and you need to start preparing, because I think they've run out of tricks. But I'll go through all that with you tomorrow. Anyway, folks, God bless, wherever you are, prep out.